Hello, and welcome to Lockdown Radio. On today's show, I want to talk a bit more about Adam Skelly. And I would like to talk about this article that was put out where they claim that Adam Skelly opening his restaurant is an example of white privilege. I find this I'm so tired of hearing about white privilege, to be honest. And I'm so tired about hearing people who call anybody who disagrees with them a racist, or they use, anything about race is what they use. I'm kind of sick of this, and I think a lot of people are. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and read this article anyway, if I can, without, getting too pissed off. We'll see. This was written by a woman, no surprise, named Maija Keppler. Let's see. I'm only kidding when I say that about women. Of course, I know that it's not all women, but there is an issue with certain white women who are just extremely uncomfortable with. What it is that they are uncomfortable with their privilege that they have, maybe as a white woman, and they kind of project that out onto other people. I don't know. This could be something that we could talk about more, but I don't know. Maybe we're not going to get that deep. But let's see. Who is Maija Keppler, the writer of the article that explains Adam Skelly is, privileged to be hauled away from his own restaurant in handcuffs, just trying to make a living. So Maija is an associate lifestyle editor, whatever that means, at HuffPost Canada. She writes about health, culture, reproductive rights, technology, food, fashion, weird feuds, and the royal family. So she's a pretty hard-hitting journalist then, I think. That's fair to say. Maija has worked as a reporter for the Canadian Press and as an editor and co-founder of Intermission, an online magazine about Toronto theatre. Well, that is kind of interesting. Maybe she should stick with that, I think, and not comment on, a hero standing up to communism and, fighting for people's rights to have businesses and to, quite frankly, accumulate wealth. What is wrong with trying to get rich? That's what's supposed to make the free market, Western style society great, and I think that's kind of what's under attack. So this lady seems to be part of this problem. So yeah, her writing has previously appeared in the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star, La Presse, Maisonneuve, Le Harpin, and the Walrus. Her name is pronounced like Maija. Of course, she spells it differently because, she just has to be different. She spells it Maija. Oh, using a silent J. That sounds like cultural appropriation against Spanish people. Let's see. So let's get back to this article. So the headline reads, "To see white privilege in action, look at Toronto's Adamson barbecue debacle." So it's hard to imagine the same outcome if Adam Skelly were a black or brown restaurant owner. I don't know. I don't know. I think if a black... First of all, I'm going to just dispute this very first statement right away. Let's see. Let's read that again. It's hard to imagine the same outcome if Adam Skelly were a black or brown restaurant owner. Well, let's look at it. What if a black or brown restaurant owner had done all the same things that Adam Skelly had done? Let's say that they had this successful restaurant that was doing well, and they had this bigger, I assume he had a pretty good following on Instagram. And, he had done all the steps. He'd kind of told everybody he was going to be doing this. He he stepped into the spotlight and, made it kind of a bigger issue. I think if he had just quietly done it, I think the police would have quietly showed up and he probably would have been shut down sooner. But I think the fact that he made it bigger is one of the reasons why it stayed open for a few days. And I think that's great. I think it was a smart move on his part. Anything that he can do to improve, I'm in favor of. I'm 100% behind what he's doing. So, and I think that a black or brown restaurant owner who did all the same things Adam Skelly did, the outcome may have been actually more favorable in this year, really. I mean, and I don't believe in any of that social justice stuff. I only believe in just justice, just plain old original justice. Social justice is kind of a flawed idea where, you actually make things unjust as a way of, improving one side compared to another. I think the answer is just let's all have the same rules. Let's all live by the same rules. And for the most part, we really do, I think. As a white man, I guess I'm saying that. We'll see. Somebody can hit me up in the comments and tell me that I'm wrong for saying that. We'll see. Okay, so a good illustration of the concept of white privilege is how we talk about people who are angry at the status quo. So people who are kind of angry at authority, I guess what she's kind of saying maybe is that an illustration of white privilege is, people who speak out more against authority. Okay? I still, even if that is true, even if more white people do speak out against authority, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad to speak out against authority. Right? Okay, moving on. On Tuesday, a white Toronto restaurant owner named Adam Skelly. First of all, how does she know? I mean, yeah, I know he looks pretty white. Let's look at his picture. He looks pretty white. I mean, not going to lie. He definitely looks like he probably plays hockey, So he does look pretty white. But how does she know, really, that he doesn't have a little something in his family, or maybe maybe another culture has married into his family, and he maybe is very rich in cultural experience. She doesn't really know that. She's just looking at him and saying, "This is a white guy." Meanwhile, I should mention, I think I did mention this, but Maija Keppler herself is white. So a white Toronto restaurant owner, I hate that sentence already, named Adam Skelly, decided he was angry about Toronto's lockdown rules. Lots of small business owners were, she says. Yeah, of course they are. As it meant a big hit to their financial well-being during a time when many were already struggling. See, right away, I can already see that she's missing the point of what it means to be a small business owner. She's only looking at it as your financial well-being. I mean, you talk to most business owners, and any of the ones who have really done well, I think, a lot of them got into it because they had a passion for what they were doing. And they also wanted the freedom and the excitement of being their own boss. And yes, when you do that and you do it well, financial well-being comes, but sometimes that takes a long time. And I think she fails to see why it is so important to people who own their own businesses to be able to stay open. She just sees it as like, oh, it's just a job. It's just like he's punching in at the local, factory, or he's, working at Walmart. Like, it's not really. If it's his own restaurant and it's his own thing independently, it's his baby, essentially. So I don't think she's really getting that point already. But let's move on. But rather than pivoting to a takeout or delivery model, In other words, pay those scam artists that skip the dishes to basically take over your restaurant. Like that's kind of the agenda that's getting pushed right now, is that whole business model. I'd like to know who's really actually making money on all that type of stuff, because I've talked to people who work in restaurants, and they don't like skip the dishes. It's just, for them, it's a necessary evil, is how they call that. So she's saying, though, but because she's the expert of, apparently she's the expert of restaurants now. And let me go back to her credentials here quickly. Sorry, I'm going to jump back and forth. Bear with me. Oh, good. My computer's actually cooperating. If that took a long time, that would have been terrible. So in her credentials, let's see. She appeared in the Globe and Mail. Yeah, she did the theater thing. No, I don't see... Sorry, Maija, but I don't see your expertise in restaurant management. But anyway, going back... So rather than pivoting to a takeout or delivery model, or here's what pisses me off a lot, or organizing to lobby the government to change its rules. So that's what he was supposed to do, was basically get into the big business government game of hiring lobbyists, like, because this is what small business owners do and think about on a daily basis. No, this guy makes amazing ribs and brisket and probably all kinds of great stuff. I think I saw some mac and cheese there when I was watching him on Rebel News. So I think he's got a lot more things to think about than organizing lobbyists. So he didn't do that. He did it a different way. But essentially he got his message through. So it's just kind of typical that this privileged white female journalist who really probably has no concept of any of this stuff, that she just thinks that, small businesses can just hire lobbyists the same way that Costco and Walmart does. Because, yeah, she's a moron. Okay, moving on. Organizing to lobby the government to change its rules. Skelly decided the law was wrong, and he was right. Which, yes, that is true. So he would just ignore the rules and open his Etobicoke restaurant for indoor dining anyway. Well, that is what he did. He should be able to do. He expressed his intentions in advance on social media, proudly stating that his restaurant would be open for indoor dining against provincial orders. Yeah, we know that. What we're saying is that the provincial orders are stupid and wrong. That is what we're saying. Like, of course. So, yeah. Expressed his intentions in advance and proudly stating that his restaurant would be open. Yeah, he should be proud. He should be very proud. But, to call this white privilege, too, is so ridiculous, because what he did was not the easy thing. He did the thing that was incredibly more difficult. It would have been much easier to just lay down and and let and watch his business dwindle, but he didn't do that. He said, no, I'm not doing that, and he did the much more difficult thing. So Toronto police showed up Tuesday but didn't do anything, which they later said was a mistake to CBC News. The medical officer of health ordered Skelly to close, but he refused, opening again the next day. Skelly sold out of food to lined up crowds both days. What a terrible person, feeding hungry people. Oh my God. Don't they know people don't need to eat during a pandemic? the fact that some people at the restaurant on Tuesday got tickets for illegal parking, while there were no consequences for illegally operating a restaurant during a pandemic, raised some eyebrows. Oh, did it now? Is that the CBC and CTV and lamestream media reporters who got tickets? That's funny. So Maija is not happy about that because she belongs to the same ilk, I think, of those lamestream media people. So I think Maija is not happy that the real journalists got tickets. And then, let's see, she shows a tweet here from someone named Christina Tenaglia. She says, there was some enforcement here today outside Adamson Barbecue. Any vehicle parked illegally on this normally rarely traveled corner received a parking ticket, but a restaurant in violation of provincial orders. No fines so far. So here she is, provoking, asking the police to start fining the restaurant, and she's upset. Oh, she's from CP24. Let's take a look at her, actually, while we're here. So she's the CP24 one who's upset that they got parking tickets. Christina Tenaglia, reporter / anchor at CP24 / CTV News Network. Yeah, / you might as well put a bunch of slashes because they're all the same thing anyway. Friends call me CT, she says. Queen's Park Press Gallery. RT's not endorsements. Yeah. And she just looks kind of like your typical, I don't know, social justice warrior type. Get rid of her. Get rid of that window. Yeah. Oh, they show a picture of the tickets too. Uh-oh. CBC got a ticket for parking somewhere. I guess the working class, City of Toronto employees, I guess, didn't take kindly to these media types. So Skelly and his supporters also received what looked like an endorsement from someone affiliated with the city. Oh, here we go. This is Jennifer Pagliaro, shows a picture of a City of Toronto truck. It's kind of driving away, and she says, this person driving an official City of Toronto truck just honked and fist bumped the pro-Adamson folks here. Oh, someone who works for the City of Toronto is not allowed to be in support of Adam Skelly opening his business. What if that happened to be Adam Skelly's father? Do we know that he doesn't work for the City of Toronto? I mean, why is it that an employee of City of Toronto is not allowed to have an opinion on this issue? See, this is such an authoritarian streak that these people have. They just want, they want to hold you accountable for everything you've ever said and for every person you've ever supported. So what? This guy driving a City of Toronto truck drove past a protest that he, believed in, and he honked and fist bumped. Good for him. That's amazing. That shows the working class. The working class is in favor of these types of things. It's just these elite media types like Jennifer Pelagrio and Christina Tenaglia and our good friend Maija here, who they just seem to hate. So by contrast, in the days before barbecue culture was started, the city shut down a community fridge that provided free food to area locals and issued a warning letter to a black man, Khalil Seavright, who built shelters for the homeless that aren't permitted on city property. So, okay. So she's saying, well, this community fridge, whatever that is, that was run by a black man got shut down a few days before. Okay. So what's your point? Do you think Adam Skelly is in favor of that? No, he's not. He's not in favor of anybody closing. That's the thing. It's about freedom for everybody. Everybody should be able to open if they want. And yes, if there's extenuating circumstances, then maybe there's new things that you need to do. I don't know. I'm not really in favor of all these policies because I think most of them are pretty stupid. But you certainly can't pick winners and losers. So I'm terribly sorry that this community fridge was shut down, but really, just as much as I'm, not in favor of that, I'm also not in favor of Adam Skelly being shut down. So she makes no point there. Skelly was arrested 2 days later. His crowdsourced legal defense fund, which launched Wednesday evening, has raised more than $133,000 as of this post's publish. So probably a lot more since too, which is great. They might need all that and more to fight this. The police delayed and relatively gentle response, as well as the resulting crowd support and endorsement of Skelly's actions, strike many people as an example of white privilege. So the police's delayed and relatively gentle response. So the gentle response that she's talking about was those horses that came through that are trained to trample on dead human bodies. That was the gentle response. Okay. Let's see a few more of these tweets. This is a guy named Maz Khan. Khan. If I was the owner of Adamson Barbecue and I opened despite the restrictions and no business license, well, I don't think anybody's saying Adam Skelly didn't have a business license. That's kind of ridiculous. He did have a business license. Obviously, you dumbass. He says, I would be dragged out, arrested, in jail, and fined within minutes. Well, he was also dragged out and arrested and in jail. So what's your point, asshole? This is beyond ridiculous. Hashtag Adamson Barbecue. Hashtag white privilege. And wow, 1,100 people liked that comment. That is depressing. Insane. Next we have what looks like a pretty good looking black girl here named Glam Doll Shari, I don't know. She says, if Adamson Barbecue was a black-owned business, would the police have had the same amount of patience? Would they waited this long to make an arrest? 3 days later? For those of who don't understand, this is the perfect example of white privilege. Hashtag food for thought. Yeah, food for thought? How about actual just food, which is what Adam Skelly makes for a living? Next, S. Atwall says, if Adamson Barbecue was called Tandoori Flame, they would have shut him down quicker than they could say chicken tiki masala. Hashtag Adamson Barbecue. Hashtag Adamson Barbecue. Hashtag white privilege. Okay, so S. Atwall. Here we go. I hate to say this because I have no issues with the brown community at all, but there are some of them who seem to want to use their skin color as a way of just making anything about that. They want to use it as a way of gaining sympathy for anything, and I feel like this is one of those people right here. So now, at the end of the article here, we have a description of what is white privilege. So white privilege doesn't mean white people get away with everything or that white people can't also suffer hardship. Oh, that's good to know. I didn't know that white people couldn't also suffer hardship. That's informative. It means that white people don't have their race used against them in everyday situations. Okay. And I don't think that other people do either, to be quite honest. They're not assumed to be more violent. White people are not assumed to be more violent. Well, maybe, I don't know. I think a lot of violent criminals are white, actually, and more dangerous based on the color of their skin. Just by virtue of being white, they sometimes receive opportunities or benefits that aren't offered to people of other color in the same position. So, again, this is just so confused and dumb. I think they're confusing economic privilege and white privilege. I think most of what they're talking about is the fact that people who have more money are offered, these different opportunities more often. It's not really about the color of your skin. It's more about how much money you have. So, and that's how I find these left-wing type social justice writers, they are really actually kind of racist, because they take all these things that are about economic privilege, and they just assume that anybody who's not white they assume that they all have no money. Like, they assume the worst when it comes to black and brown people, or whatever they're saying now. They just don't really know. And they're not members of the working class. If they were, they would probably know more black and brown people, and they wouldn't have such stupid opinions. So it goes on and says, white privilege is like an invisible, weightless knapsack of special provisions. Oh, I'm so glad that I have my invisible and weightless knapsack of special provisions with me. Maps, passports, code books, visas, clothes. Yep, that's right, because black people don't wear clothes. That is true. Tools and blank checks. Yep. So come again. My invisible, weightless knapsack is filled with blank checks. Why the fuck do I go to work then, dumbass? Writes anti-racist educator Peggy McIntosh. Oh my goodness. I feel like I could probably do a story about her. I don't even know if I want to go down that rabbit hole right now. It's a set of unearned and sometimes unconscious privileges that many people of color are not granted. McIntosh lists some of the everyday ways white people benefit from the societal systems in place. Number one, I can turn on the television or open the front page of the paper and see people of my race widely represented. Okay. I don't know if that's true or not. It doesn't matter if it's true. It's just they say whatever fits their narrative is what it comes down to. When I am told about our national heritage or about civilization, I am shown that people of my color made it what it is. Okay, so this is saying that as a white person, you're seeing, that, white people made the society that we currently live in. Well, there could be something there. I guess even a broken clock is right twice a day. So maybe Peggy McIntosh, I don't know. It could be true. But every single person has the ability to influence the way society moves forward. So that's the way to look at it. Next, I can take a job with an affirmative action employer without having coworkers on the job suspect that I got it because of my race. Well, then get rid of affirmative action, and then you will never have that issue, right? That solves that problem. Perfect. Me and Peggy agree. Next one, I can choose public accommodation without fearing that people of my race cannot get in or will be mistreated in the places I have chosen. So if you get a nice hotel and you have some black friends staying with you, I guess, you have to worry that, they're going to get, they're going to call the police on them and think that they're robbing the place. I don't know. Like, I've seen black people in hotels. I think this woman has some really weird thoughts on what reality is. And lastly, she says, I can be sure that if I need legal or medical help, my race will not work against me. Okay, good to know. So, in Skelly's case, his status as a white man meant he was afforded the benefit of doubt, the leeway to keep breaking the law, and the support to navigate the consequences. Yeah, well, the reason he had support is because he's right. And you know what? When the law, I heard this just the other day, a good old quote, when the law becomes tyranny, or sorry, I fucked that up. When tyranny becomes law, rebellion becomes duty. So Adam Skelly was just doing his duty as a Canadian, standing up to shitty laws. Okay, so what happens when people of color protest the status quo? Well, let's see. There's a vast gap between how we treat white people who break the law for a cause they believe in and people of color who do the same. It's difficult to imagine a black or brown restaurant owner treated with the patience and tolerance from the police and the city Skelly received. Over the summer, after months of pandemic pressures that have disproportionately affected racialized people. Oh, God, she said it. Ooh, I hate that word. Racialized people. Ugh. That is so disgusting. Talk about people who just want to be victims, right? Like, can you imagine? Where's my microphone? Here we go. Can you imagine wanting to be referred to as a racialized person? Like, RACIALIZED. Like, it's like racialized, as if it's something that happened to you, like something wrong happened to you. I mean, talk about people who just want to be victims. They want your sympathy. They're whores for your sympathy. That's who these people are. They are whores for your sympathy. And after the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and the shooting of Jacob Blake, black communities across the world protested against racism and police brutality. The status quo they were fighting was a very present reality where innocent and unharmed black people regularly and disproportionately experience harassment. I'm not going to say that I think anything is perfect. I do think that there are issues, and I actually supported the Black Lives Matter protests before they became crazy and Antifa kind of got involved in it. At that point, I said no thanks, because the whole thing got hijacked by this, communist movement. But the original, when it first kind of started with Colin Kaepernick, I did support him because I believe people should be able to protest the government. Why would we fight for the freedom to protest the government if nobody ever exercises it? So I was in favor of this, but I'm also in favor of protesting lockdowns, because that affects people of all colors. That is a societal thing, and it's very much a class warfare as well. So it transcends race. But yeah, this is where they kind of try to make it that you have to be, if you are a lockdown protester, then maybe you can't support anybody who wants to talk about police brutality. Well, I say you can be both. So, disproportionately experience harassment, violence, and often death at the hands of police officers, many of whom don't face legal consequences. Yeah, a lot of that bad stuff that is, I feel like it's a lot of an American thing. Maybe, I think it is more so than a Canadian thing. That's my one feeling. And I also think that unarmed regularly and disproportionately experience harassment, violence. Yeah, I think it's an American thing, and right, it's these kind of policies. Actually, it's I think some of it is Joe Biden's 1994 crime bill that can be attributed to a lot of this attitude that the police seem to have towards black people. Like they're kind of, he somewhat made it part of the training where the police needed to look at black suspects as more dangerous. And that takes time to change. So there's your president-elect right there, Joe Biden, the reason why all this is happening. The summer's racial reckoning saw Black Lives Matter gain more mainstream acceptance than it had received before, as many big brands voiced their support for the organization, often in cringeworthy and performative ways. That's very true. But many protesters didn't receive the benefit of the doubt that Toronto police officers offered Skelly. That's not true. They did. They took over the city square for like weeks, I think. News outlets, city officials, and political pundits smeared protesters by speaking with horror about looting and rioting, when in fact the overwhelming majority of protesters were peaceful. The looting was equated with black people being systematically killed for no reason. Let me read that again. I kind of glazed over that. News outlets, city officials, and political pundits smeared protesters by speaking with horror about looting and rioting, when in fact the overwhelming majority of protests were peaceful. The looting was equated with black people being systematically killed for no reason. So, yeah, I think most of the protests were peaceful, at least until Antifa showed up and hijacked it, and then it became what their agenda was. You know, you can see as soon as Black Lives Matter became all about transgender rights and, hardcore feminism and all that type of stuff, that is not really black issues. I find a lot of black people in many ways are more conservative. They're kind of more of that old world kind of way where, they're just more conservative on issues like, on gays and other things. So I feel like it's a good sign that the whole Black Lives Matter thing was hijacked by Antifa. And so that's where your violence came in right there, when it turned into a bunch of white people who were screaming at other white people about white privilege, which is what this whole article is too. Moving on. More significantly, so many peaceful protesters were arrested, detained, or otherwise treated like criminals that one of the biggest funds to receive charitable donations were organizations paying protesters bail. Now, so one of the biggest funds to receive charitable donations. So I wonder where all these charitable donations came from. I mean, sounds like something George Soros was doing, trying to get all of these, paid protesters to be back out on the streets. 2020 is such a weird year where it seems like they are purposely trying to tear down society. I mean, and it's like first you take away people's jobs, so create more unemployment, which is going to inherently, increase crime. But if that isn't enough, normalize the idea that everybody should wear a mask. So have more crime. Let's wear masks. And let's release prisoners. They did that. Let's normalize rioting. Let's say that that's okay. All these things have really led to just the destruction of our society. I feel like it's what it's intended to do. And that's what we need to stand up against, and we need to speak out against this. So in Toronto, 3 Black Lives Matter protesters were arrested in July for throwing paint on statues of Sir John A. Macdonald. Actually, she didn't say Sir John A. She just said John A. Macdonald. She left out the Sir. And I just naturally put it in there, actually. So, I don't know. Did he lose his Sir? Or, I don't know. Egerton Ryerson and King Edward VII, which they paired with protesters stating, "Tear down monuments that represent slavery, colonialism, and violence." They were held in jail overnight and were all charged with 3 counts of mischief under 5,000 and conspiracy to commit a summary offense. There's nothing wrong with putting people in, charging somebody with mischief under 5,000. They're lucky that they didn't call it mischief over 5,000, to be quite honest, because, the city has to hire now some contractor to clean up those statues, and we know that they can't get anything done for less than $5,000. So I have no idea why it was only mischief under 5,000. So to recap, throw paint on a statue. If you're black, spend the night in jail. Purposely and publicly defy provincial bylaws meant to stop the spread of a pandemic. If you're white, get fined and keep on trucking for 2 days. Ooh, and then at the end, she has a picture of paint on a statue. It says 3 black. So this must be King Edward VII, who I'm sure was not a great person. I mean, first of all, if you become king at any time, you're probably a terrible person, really. I don't think we would ever want to sit down and have a beer with any kings from the past. I think they're probably all terrible. But it's still a part of our history. It really is. And Sir John A. Macdonald is the first prime minister of this country, and I know, the schools, the terrible schools that were started under his administration, I guess. I hate that system. It's awful, and I wonder. But it is still a part of the history. What were the name of those goddamn schools? I don't know. You know what I mean. So, how the public response reveals white privilege. In the time between Skelly's initial flouting of rules and his arrest, he refused to close his restaurant and in fact announced he would open other locations in the coming days. You might think he'd be condemned by politicians and legislators, and some did. The Toronto Mayor, John Tory, and he did like Toronto Mayor John Tory, but others, like Ontario MPP Randy Hillier, praised Skelly for his courage and conviction. Well, yeah, Randy Hillier is one of the good guys. That's why. Hillier respected Skelly's illegal maneuver. I encourage others to do the same. So this is Randy Hillier's tweet. He says, "Today I recognized Adam Skelly of Adamson Barbecue for his courage and conviction. He tested the law, and I encourage others to do the same. I will be testing the law tomorrow. Hashtag at No Lockdowns 1. Pots and Pans rally at 10 a.m. in front of the legislature. Join me." Well, yeah, it was the residential schools that was bothering me. I don't know. I'd like to hear what people's opinions are on, these throwing paint on these statues. Maybe that's a discussion. I don't know. I just think it's part of the history of the country, and these anarchist, Antifa type protesters, they don't have any right to tear down these statues that are, in major public squares. So yeah, that was the article about how Adam Skelly's opening of his restaurant is an example of white privilege. What a joke, by Maija Keppler. Thank you very much for listening. This has been Lockdown Radio.